The Young and the Restless spoilers Wednesday, full September 10th, 2025. Daniel Romalotti had always walked a line between humility and charm. A man whose past mistakes made him cautious, but whose artistic soul gave him moments of unguarded sincerity. When he sat beside Tessa Porter, guitar in hand, working through the chords of a new song they had created together, he wasn't thinking about danger, betrayal, or temptation, at least not consciously. For him, it was a moment of connection, a chance to share something raw and creative with someone who understood the language of music as deeply as he did. Tessa, her eyes lighting up with the thrill of artistic discovery, had pushed him harder than he expected, challenging him to expand his skills and embrace the vulnerability of songwriting. Together, they had carved out a melody that carried not only the echoes of their collaboration, but also the shadow of his father, Danny Romalotti, the man whose career had defined so much of Daniel's identity. Both of them believed that Danny would love the song, and in that belief lay a kind of innocence. Yet innocence rarely lasted long in Genoa City. When Daniel looked at Tessa, gratitude swelled in him, but words have a way of betraying more than we intend. He told her she was beautiful, not in the safe, casual tone of a friend, not in the manner of a student praising a mentor, but in a way that made Tessa pause, her breath catching as if the compliment had shifted something between them. It was simple, perhaps even spontaneous, but layered beneath his voice was an energy that didn't feel platonic. Tessa, always sensitive to the nuances of intention, felt the weight of his words linger in the air, more intimate than appropriate, more personal than necessary. She smiled, but her mind was already racing, wondering what he meant, whether it was just Daniel's gratitude spilling over into flattery or something else entirely. The compliment could be dismissed as harmless, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. It was a spark, uninvited yet undeniable, that threatened to ignite something she hadn't been looking for. Tessa's loyalty to Mariah Copeland had always been her anchor, but Mariah's absence left space for doubts and curiosities she had buried beneath commitment. She cared deeply for her wife, but Tessa had lived a life filled with choices, temptations, and moments where the line between loyalty and longing blurred. Daniel wasn't just anyone, he was the son of a rock star, a man trying to carve his own musical identity, a man who looked at her as though she was both muse and partner. Music was intimacy, and as they sat close, guitars in hand, the air seemed charged with something unspoken. Tessa couldn't help but wonder, was Daniel reaching out for more than collaboration, and if so, did she want to pull away or lean in? Meanwhile, far from the tender, yet precarious energy between Daniel and Tessa, another kind of scheme was quietly unfolding in Genoa City. Billy Abbott and Sally Spectra were blissfully unaware that a new plot was being spun around them, a web of deception that would catch them off guard. Billy, ever the gambler in love and business, thought he was secure in his moves, while Sally, fiery and ambitious, believed she had a handle on her destiny. But neither of them realized that while they played their games, others were already moving pieces on the board. Their ignorance was dangerous, for in this town, unawareness was often the first step toward ruin. Back in the music studio, Daniel's words echoed louder than any melody. Tessa was at a crossroads, caught between gratitude for the compliment and suspicion of its meaning. Was Daniel merely expressing admiration for her artistry and her spirit, or was he confessing something deeper? Was this the beginning of a slippery slope, one that could compromise not only her marriage, but her reputation? The next move mattered. If she brushed it off, the moment might dissolve into nothing, just another awkward slip in the whirlwind of creativity. But if she allowed herself to dwell on it, to wonder what it would be like to test the boundaries of their connection, she would find herself sliding down a slope that could not be easily climbed back up. And Daniel, for all his good intentions, might not be able to stop himself from reaching out again, from letting his admiration grow into something more dangerous. The stage was set for a moment that could change everything. Would Tessa hold to the safe path of loyalty and dismiss Daniel's words as a fleeting spark of artistic passion? Or would she let herself be swept into the possibility of something reckless, something intoxicating, something forbidden? In Genoa City, the line between inspiration and temptation was always thin, and sometimes all it took was a single word motiful to tip the balance toward betrayal. Tessa Porter's world had always revolved around the delicate balance of love, music, and motherhood. But in the days following Mariah Copeland's return from her business trip, that balance shattered into fragments that left her teetering on the edge of despair. The Mariah who came home was not the woman she remembered. This version was restless, secretive, and cloaked in a darkness Tessa could not penetrate. Their reunion should have been filled with laughter, stories, and intimacy. Yet instead the silences stretched longer, the gazes grew colder, and the gulf between them deepened by the hour. Tessa whispered to herself in the solitude of their empty home that she was falling apart, muttering words that sounded like confessions of defeat. When Mariah reached for her, there was no warmth, only distance, and Tessa found herself packing a bag and walking out. Desperate to escape the suffocating tension that had invaded what should have been a sanctuary. Unknown to her, whispers were already circulating across Genoa City about what had transpired during Mariah's absence, whispers that carried a chilling accusation that during a drunken night, Mariah had smothered an elderly man with a pillow in a haze of recklessness. No one knew the truth, but in this city rumors had the power to destroy just as swiftly as facts. And Tessa's growing unease was only magnified by the knowledge that something unspoken and sinister clung to her wife like a second skin. As Tessa struggled with the unraveling of her marriage, Daniel Romalotti found himself pulled closer into her orbit. Their collaboration on a new song had already created sparks, not of passion at first, but of inspiration. Daniel's fingers moved across the guitar strings with an eagerness that reminded Tessa of why she had fallen in love with music in the first place, and their creative synergy felt pure, untainted by the chaos surrounding them. Yet creativity had a way of forging intimacy, and intimacy had a way of slipping into territory neither intended. Daniel's compliments came often, his admiration genuine, but tinged with something warmer, deeper, more dangerous. When he told her she was beautiful, the words carried more weight than a casual remark. They hung in the air, thick and charged, making Tessa's breath catch as her mind stumbled over what he might mean. Was it flattery born of gratitude, or was it desire slipping through the cracks of restraint? Tessa, vulnerable and aching for comfort, felt the ground beneath her tilt. Daniel, caught between his humility and his attraction, realized too late that he had stepped onto a slope where one misstep could lead to ruin. In another life, perhaps they might have been free to explore this connection, but in this world, Tessa's loyalty to Mariah and Daniel's own tangled family legacy made the mere possibility of a kiss not just reckless, but explosive. Meanwhile, across town, another story unfolded with equal parts ambition and destruction. Billy Abbott and Sally Spectra were consumed with excitement over the launch of Abbott Communications, a bold venture they believed would cement their place in the hierarchy of Genoa City's power players. They planned their debut party meticulously, envisioning it as a triumph not only for business, but for themselves as a couple, proof that their partnership could succeed both personally and professionally. Yet in the shadows lurked Kane Ashby, a man who had returned with a mission to reestablish himself as the dominant force in town. Kane had no intention of watching Billy bask in the spotlight, no patience for Sally's rise, and no interest in letting Abbott Communications enjoy even a moment of unchallenged glory. He styled himself as the new kingpin of Genoa City's business world, a mastermind prepared to topple rivals one deal at a time. For Kane, sabotage wasn't just a tactic, it was a declaration of war. And so, as Billy and Sally toasted their future, Kane plotted a bombshell revelation that would turn their celebration into chaos, exposing weaknesses they didn't even realize they had. The threads of these stories, seemingly separate, were destined to collide at the very heart of Genoa City's social calendar, the Abbott Communications launch party. Guests arrived in glittering gowns and crisp suits, eager to celebrate the dawn of a new enterprise. Among them were Daniel, Tessa, and Mariah, each carrying their own unspoken burdens. Daniel lingered close to Tessa, offering her quiet reassurances that doubled as subtle temptations. Tessa's eyes darted toward the entrance every few minutes, searching for Mariah, uncertain whether she hoped her wife would appear or feared it. When Mariah finally walked in, the air shifted. Conversations hushed, eyes followed, and the weight of rumors seemed to precede her like a shadow. Tessa's heart clenched as she saw the stiffness in her wife's posture, the defensive set of her jaw, the way she refused to meet anyone's gaze for too long. Whatever the truth behind the whispered accusations, Mariah wore the look of someone haunted, and it unsettled everyone who saw her. As if the tension weren't already unbearable, Kane chose that moment to strike. With deliberate timing, he interrupted Billy's toast, stepping into the spotlight with a smug confidence that silenced the room. He spoke of truths hidden behind corporate facades, of secrets that could not remain buried, and with every word, he chipped away at the image Billy and Sally had so carefully crafted. His revelation was a calculated mix of fact and insinuation, enough to sow doubt without offering clarity, enough to ensure that Abbott Communications would be the subject of gossip for weeks to come. Billy bristled with fury, Sally's eyes flashed with indignation, and yet neither could deny the damage Kane had inflicted. The party, meant to be a declaration of success, had become a battlefield of reputations. In the chaos, Daniel and Tessa found themselves momentarily alone, tucked away near the edge of the ballroom. The noise of the scandal faded into the background as Daniel leaned closer, his voice low, his eyes searching hers for something unspoken. Tessa felt the pull of the moment, the temptation to let go of her doubts, her fears, her loneliness, and simply surrender to the comfort Daniel offered. But as their faces inched closer, Mariah appeared in the doorway behind them, her expression unreadable. Did she see what was happening? Did she hear the words Daniel had spoken earlier? The uncertainty froze Tessa in place, the kiss hovering on the edge of possibility, but never landing. The interruption was enough to shatter the moment, leaving both of them shaken by how close they had come. The night spiraled further as whispers about Mariah's alleged crime grew louder, fed by the chaos Kane had unleashed. Guests speculated openly, their eyes flickering between Mariah's tense demeanor and Tessa's pale face. Tessa realized with dread that even if the rumor was false, the mere existence of it would stain their lives, casting doubt on Mariah's innocence and eroding the trust that had once defined their marriage. Daniel, torn between his loyalty to his father's legacy and his feelings for Tessa, wondered whether stepping closer to her meant offering her protection or pushing her into scandal she could not escape. Billy and Sally, reeling from Kane's sabotage, vowed to strike back, but their focus on revenge left them blind to the cracks forming in their own partnership. And Kane, watching it all unfold, smiled with satisfaction, knowing that in one night he had destabilized not just a company, but the fragile bonds between couples, families, and rivals across the city. By the time the party ended, nothing was the same. Tessa left without speaking to Mariah, her eyes hollow with doubt. Daniel stood alone in the quiet aftermath, haunted by the near kiss that had almost changed everything. Billy and Sally retreated to plot their counterattack, their triumph soured by Kane's machinations. And Mariah, cloaked in silence, carried her secret home, knowing that the truth, whatever it was, would eventually come crashing into the open. Genoa City had been set aflame by rumors, betrayals, and ambitions, and the weeks ahead promised only more devastation. For Tessa, the choice loomed large. Would she fight to salvage her marriage with a woman drowning in scandal? Or would she let herself fall into the arms of a man whose admiration threatened to consume them both? For Billy and Sally, the war with Kane was only beginning, and for Mariah, every step she took was shadowed by the possibility of exposure. In this city, no secret stayed hidden forever, and every betrayal demanded a price. Kyle Abbott had always believed that love could justify risk, that if his intentions were pure enough, the choices he made in secret could someday be forgiven. But now, Standing face to face with Claire Newman, that belief was crumbling under the weight of his own deception. For weeks, he had concealed the truth of the deal he struck with her grandfather, thinking he could contain the fallout, manage the consequences, and shield her from the ugliness of it all. Yet the moment of reckoning had arrived, and there was no hiding anymore. He confessed that he had promised to leave town, to distance himself from her life entirely, in exchange for $5 million. A sum meant to buy her freedom from pain, but which instead had bought her a fresh betrayal. Claire's shock was visceral, her eyes widening as she tried to process the cruel irony. The man who swore never to hurt her had hurt her in the most personal way possibly, be turning her into a pawn in a deal that traded love for power, devotion for money, loyalty for secrecy. Kyle's explanation spilled out, heavy with desperation. He insisted it wasn't greed or ambition that drove him, but love. He said he had accepted the deal because he believed walking away was the only way to protect her from her family's schemes. That every dollar he accepted was tainted with his vow to never let her suffer as collateral damage in their war. But the words, no matter how sincere, landed like shards of glass in Claire's heart. For her, it wasn't about the money or the terms, it was about the secrecy. He had taken away her choice, decided for her, and acted behind her back as though her trust wasn't worth the risk of honesty. The damage wasn't just the deal itself, it was the realization that Kyle had gambled with her life, her future, her heart, and then hidden the truth until it was too late. Claire's fury was not a fire that burned hot and then fizzled. It was cold, cutting, the kind of anger born from repeated wounds that layered upon one another until forgiveness seemed impossible. She remembered every promise he had made, every word about loyalty and honesty, every moment where he had sworn their bond was unbreakable. And yet, betrayal kept threading itself through their story. This wasn't the first secret, and she feared it wouldn't be the last. Her mind raced with questions she was almost afraid to answer. Could she ever trust Kyle again? Could she build a life with a man who thought deception was protection? Or was this the proof she needed that their love, no matter how passionate, was destined to collapse under the weight of lies? Kyle's anguish was visible, his attempts to explain frantic, his remorse palpable. He begged for a chance to repair what he had broken, to prove that the deal was a misguided act of love rather than a calculated betrayal. He promised transparency, swore there were no more secrets, and pleaded with Claire to see the man behind the mistake, not just the mistake itself. But Claire's silence was louder than any words, her hesitation a verdict in itself. The more he spoke, the clearer it became that his love, no matter how intense, had been weaponized by secrecy, and she was the one left to decide whether it was still worth saving. As the cracks deepened between Kyle and Claire, elsewhere in Genoa City another storm brewed with equal potential for devastation. Phyllis Summers, ever the rebel, was once again skating dangerously close to disaster. Nick Newman had warned her explicitly about Kane Ashby, about his latest venture into AI technology, and about the risks tied to becoming entangled in his schemes. But Phyllis, as always, thrived on defiance. To her, Kane represented opportunity, a chance to align herself with innovation, influence, and perhaps a way to reassert her power in a city that too often underestimated her. She ignored Nick's words, brushing off his concerns as the overprotective instincts of a man who didn't understand her hunger for relevance. What she didn't realize was that Kane's AI project wasn't simply risky, it was volatile, a powder keg that could detonate reputations and fortunes alike. Nick's warnings weren't empty paranoia. He had seen enough of Kane's manipulations to know that the man's so-called brilliance often masked recklessness, that his ambition rarely accounted for collateral damage. Yet Phyllis, stubborn and headstrong, dismissed the danger. In her mind, she had weathered worse storms, survived worse betrayals, and clawed her way back from ruin too many times to fear the gamble of Kane's promises. What she didn't yet see was that her defiance would set her on a collision course not only with Kane's enemies, but with her own children, her friends, and anyone left who still believed she could be trusted. If Kyle's secrets threatened to shatter his relationship with Claire, Phyllis's refusal to heed warning would soon ignite a crisis that might consume more than just her. In Genoa City, love and loyalty were fragile currencies, easily devalued by secrets and ambition. Kyle stood at risk of losing Claire forever, not because of the money he had taken, but because of the trust he had broken. Claire was left holding the shards of their bond, questioning whether love could survive betrayal after betrayal. And in another corner of the city, Phyllis set herself on a dangerous path with Kane, one that could lead to innovation or implosion, depending on which truth emerged first. Together, these parallel stories painted a portrait of a city where the pursuit of love, power, and survival was always complicated by the shadow of betrayal, and where the next revelation was never far from turning passion into destruction.